Took me a while to find the secret switch that allowed me to record. Greetings, everyone. I welcome you all. Michael just arrived on the screen a few minutes ago, saying he was going to the hospital because they wanted to intubate his mother. And the mother decided she didn't want to be intubated, so she's going on hospice care, comfort care. And I saw Michael's distress. And I felt his distress. On the other hand, Bata had a great experience a few days ago. Maybe he'll talk about it. Maybe he won't. But I wanted to raise some issues. For years, I've been saying, stay away from concepts. Become dumb as a rock. Because becoming dumb as a rock is the closest we can come to the stateless state that Robert talks about, Nisargadatta and Ramana talk about. On the other hand, both Robert and Ramana and Nisargadatta talk about the absolute a lot, even though no words can describe it. No words can outline it. No experience can grasp it. It's beyond experience. And I first had an experience of that state shortly after Robert left Los Angeles for Sedona. It was my third awakening. It's so hard to describe what that experience is like. There aren't really words to describe it. And words, if I were to describe it, would give you a description that was untrue from your point of view. The closest I can come is by saying one morning, I seemed to be awake in a dream. I don't remember the dream, but I seemed to be fully awake in a dream. But there was nothing to see, nothing to hear, nothing to taste or touch. There is no existence whatsoever, and not even an awareness of myself at this point. Then I became aware of a light entering that darkness which was me, but which I didn't perceive as darkness. I didn't have any idea. Nothing entered my brain at all, no interpretations. And just as if you can closely observe your awakening in the morning, it goes something like this. A few minutes or a few seconds before you wake up, you start feeling a feeling in your chest, which is like the arising of the life force in you. It begins to brush against you. You begin to get the impression that you're going to wake up. We all know this experience. We've all had this experience. And finally, I did wake up. At first, I was just aware. I can't even say of that which I was aware. But it is as if the world arose in me, and I didn't recognize it as the world. I didn't recognize it as light. Didn't recognize it as consciousness or an object, because there was no recognition, no memory, no understanding. Then I came fully awake, realizing who I was, where I was. And the sleep consciousness totally disappeared, and I was totally in waking consciousness. But the amazing thing happened was that the awakening conscious didn't affect me. Just as the sleep consciousness had not affected me, because I felt fully awake while I was still asleep and began to see the arising of consciousness within me. And when consciousness came, again, my basic sense of existence was not altered by the coming of consciousness. Now, normally when we wake up in the morning, we go from darkness and dullness and sleep consciousness, which is heavy and dark and dull, to coming awake. And usually it's a very rapid process. And we feel totally different, like we have come alive out of sleep, and sleep having had no recognition whatsoever. But this time I was aware fully in my sleep and in my dream. And then when waking consciousness came, I felt nothing different in me. Sleep left, waking consciousness came, and I was unaffected by either. Sleep was there, dream was there, waking was there. They were all the same, just passing through. And I was unaffected. kind of an amazing experience for someone who's never experienced it. I told Robert about it. I called him in Sedona, told him what happened. And very nonchalantly, he said, "Congratulations, you're enlightened." I had seen that consciousness came to me like an entity. Sleep consciousness came to me in the same way, as did dream consciousness. But I was not consciousness. I was not dream consciousness, and I was not sleep consciousness. I was that to which these states came, not at my bidding, but were sort of forced on me. That which I had thought was my world, my universe, my existence, was like a temporary state which came to me. But I recognize it didn't touch me. It was something I watched, something I was aware of, even the sounds. The body, world, consciousness were all separate from me. I was totally beyond existence of anything, existence of the sun, of the moon, of my own body, my own consciousness, and the different kinds of consciousness I experienced: sleep, dream, waking state. And again, you can add to that all of the spiritual states that one has on the way to really awakening. All these things just came to me. And I saw they all came and passed by. They were all temporary. And in the waking state, all kinds of things and experiences happened. The life of Ed Musica unfolded. And I, as the witness, was untouched by anything that happened. But I normally had identified with the experience of the existence of the body and the world that the body was immersed in, but not that day. What I realized, not at that moment, but later, was that we identify with the waking consciousness, and sometimes with the dream consciousness to a lesser extent. And usually we're not aware of sleeping consciousness at all, unless we're long-term meditators that are aware of the comings and goings of various states. Not at that time, but years later, many years later, for 17 years, that state did not return. I knew it was there, but I didn't experience it until after I had my awakening in 2010 with the recognition of the I am as me, the cosmic consciousness, as it's sometimes called, awakening. As the Godhead, so to speak, arose out of my gut and into my chest and into my head, and they exploded out into the universe, as happened with Robert. Only then did I realize the third part that I hadn't seen before. That waking consciousness is about relationships. It's about love for the other. It's about love for one's own self. It's about discovering one's own energy body, one's own sense of presence, one's own I amness, and the very powerful experience of wanting to shout out loud, I have come alive. I am. Subsequent to that infusion of power into the totality of that which was me, I began being able to play with the various states of consciousness and unconsciousness, and be able to go back and forth consciously by direction. After briefly waking up, realizing I was awake, I was able to travel backwards into sleep, the comfort of sleep and the darkness of sleep, and began to be able to see what sleep consciousness was like. Sleep consciousness, waking consciousness, and seeing that neither had anything to do with me. They were like cloud banks coming in, washing over me, and when they did wash over me, my body and the world appeared, and when they disappeared, my body and the world disappeared into the darkness of the night of consciousness, which was dark and very comfortable. And I noticed that dark and comfortable state was a bit like the experience of the absolute. And when you're staying at the place of the absolute, sleeping consciousness and waking consciousness come to you, unbidden, unsolicited, not in your control. But briefly, I had them in control for a while, for a few months. And I talked about it in satsang, that you can play with it if you're alert in the morning. I don't know if anybody was able to do it after my instructions. But I knew what had happened was for 16 or 17 years, I was unable to get back to that state. And instead, kept hanging around near the boundary of that state by just resting into nothingness, so to speak, without any thought. But it was quite boring after a while. That's when I became a teacher of awakening to cosmic consciousness, awakening to God, awakening to the life force as being more exciting, more enrapturing, more grabbing than this thing about nothingness. But now I feel a return to that state of being host to consciousness and sleep consciousness. When waking consciousness comes, I can witness it. I can grasp the totality of consciousness and just stay there holding it in my embrace. But I'm not at all aware of who or what I am. I just know that I am embracing with my attention, with my awareness, the totality of consciousness. And I also feel that when I'm doing this, great purification of that consciousness is going on. And then I ask you to try to do that yourself, wherever you are in your development, which is to become aware not so much of the objects in the world, the activity of the world, the auditory phenomena, the visual phenomena, the thinking, awareness of your body, lungs. But instead of looking at the objects, look at the entire field of consciousness, which includes all of that I just talked about. It includes awareness of the world around, the sounds, awareness of your body. And if your mind is operating, awareness of the mind. At this deep level, you won't be feeling any emotions. You will certainly be aware of consciousness itself. And could even become aware of awareness itself. And when you become aware of awareness itself, there is a tension there because it feels abnormal to be attending to the subject, the witness, the absolute self. But you begin to be able to feel it in yourself. And it's vast like space, more subtle than consciousness, certainly more subtle than the objects of consciousness. It's utterly quiet. Any forms are within the consciousness and not within me who witnesses consciousness. Any daily activity that I get caught up in If I just relax, if I just sit down and relax, close my eyes and withdraw, soon loses its importance. And I merge with that space, that emptiness. That emptiness that contains the entire universe while I'm awake. And I can hold in my hand, so to speak. I can hold in my sense of presence and my attention the totality of consciousness, my own consciousness, and see that I hold the entire universe in my hand at the same time. And strangely enough, I have nothing to do with it. It did not come about because of my volition. I did not wish for this to happen. It came to me. And the same with you. Consciousness is forced on you. But what you really are is that which witnesses consciousness, which you're not aware of yet because you haven't done enough meditation to ferret out the various inner feelings that constitute, or sensations, that constitute a conscious person, conscious body, etc. There are so many different things inside of you on a sensual basis, including that which holds them all, is the owner of the totality, in the sense of being the host. You're both the seer and the seen. But until you become aware of that yourself in your own meditations, it's just a concept for you. Robert's concept, Nisargadatta's concept, Ramana's concept, Musica's concept. Quietly. Listen to your own depths of emptiness. The field of you spread throughout the universe, becoming aware of the totality of the objects in the world that are you, that you hold as you, as a guest, inside your own field of consciousness. It's like a field of you. You're the totality of it. And yet, it doesn't dominate you. Just like the viewer of a map does not confuse him or herself with the totality of the path of what's out there in the world. You in this silence have no understanding. Your awareness is not of concepts in the mind, but of the totality of consciousness as a whole. You're aware of the entire universe that is presented to you at the moment. Space-time, as I learned when I was taking physics in college, is conceptually the four-dimensional solid. 3 dimensions of space, 1 dimension of time. And where you are, you can say, consists of an instantaneous photo of a slice of that 4-dimensional solid. And that slice of awareness of being within the timeline of our individual worlds changes along a pathway that is us in the world. But you want to speak about your recent experience?
Hi everyone. It was several days ago, and during the meditation, it was so deep and profound, and I was kind of trying to abide in the heart, and then suddenly I felt that I finally came to my true home. There were nowhere to go, nothing to seek. It's like my final stop. And it was very peaceful, and I just wanted to stay there for eternally. And that was the experience.
Are you aware of it now?
Sometimes, but sometimes I lose it.
Thank you.
And I'm very glad for your guidance, Ed.
Your sitting is getting very pure. Thank you. Jay, I have a website, and you probably know of it, called wearesentience.com. And on it has a list of topics, and one of them is Nisargadatta. If you just rest the cursor on Nisargadatta, a drop list comes down with the resources for several books, and including The Ultimate Medicine. That's the same edition as I have.
Okay.
So download it.
Oh, all right.
Use that as your reference. It'll allow you to download.
Shall I go to it now?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Yeah, I go to that. I go to resources there all the time. Yeah, I know of it, and I'll do that because it seems like our two texts are about 10 or 12 pages apart, and that's problematic. Thank you, Edgy.
Yeah, they're different sized books. The current book is larger, and there's more words on a page.
Yeah, this one seems to be a newer one.
Does anybody have a comment or talk about their own experience? By the way, Mark, have you started coordinating the in-between satsangs, not on Sunday or Wednesday, to have readings from The Ultimate Medicine?
Yeah, we kind of started, need to work on it. I could reserve Monday for that.
No, reserve almost every day for that.
Okay, so you said spend like 10 minutes or so on it and then do some chant or some discussion, like don't.
Well, no. Spend 5 minutes on a reading.
Okay.
10 minutes on silence, another 5 minutes on the reading, And then maybe the rest of the time on silence and chanting.
Okay.
Enough to get through maybe 3 pages.
Will do.
Vesselina, what do you experience right now?
Well, I'm happy to be here. And I'm just very sad.
Do you think about coming to the United States?
Yeah, I think about it, then I don't think about I drop it as an idea.
When do you return to classes or tests?
Around the 10th of September, I start having exams, and I have 3 exams, and if I take them all, I go to my last year, and then when I enroll to the last year, probably depending where I start, maybe I'll be free, more free. I don't know. But I really don't know what to do.
You could come here to be with Michael and his mother for a few weeks. Take the test, take your books with you.
I know, he is telling me he was expecting me to go. Just like right now. But it's more difficult to be done, like, because of all the applying of the visa. It takes time. I go to someone to fill my documents, then they give me a date from the embassy, then this, then that. And it will, yeah, I don't have time to prepare for those exams.
Okay. Ian, how are you today?
Very quiet, Ed. Very quiet. I really entered into your state today, and there's not a great deal to be said about that. I've been reading Nisargadatta when I wake up, and right at that moment when consciousness comes in, I've been picking up the book. And I recognised yesterday that I actually don't have to understand what I'm reading. It's just the energy of opening up to what he is. So yeah, that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Raju.
You mentioned in the previous many satsangs, you see yourself catching a thought train and then again coming back. Especially the last maybe few months, I've seen that I'm able to not catch a thought train and be able to stay there. It still feels like there is one thing that is moving, but there is always this background thing that is stable.
Yes.
And that is the dichotomy that, it still feels the I, again, I don't want to get into concepts or anything. I'm not reading anything. I'm just staying there to say that what is the I is still the background, the one that is stable, which is almost untouched. And
Yes.
is that it, or what is the movement? Okay.
Yes.
So,
but you can practice being aware of the totality of consciousness also, as well as being aware of the unmoving I. which is not aware of its amness, if you know what I mean. It's not aware of its existence. It's just aware of the stable platform for witnessing. It has no words, no concepts. It's just there. And you can hold on to it if you want. Because you are that. And it still has an ability. It's not just a witness, because it can focus where its attention goes, whether it's to the world or to grasping the totality of consciousness or staying inside of its own self. You're just learning a new skill. And after a while, there will be no thinking about the train of consciousness, because you'll know you have nothing to do with it. And it can go as it pleases, because you're not really paying any attention to it.
Now, you mentioned now also that the consciousness comes and goes, and it reveals itself, and that happens.
Talk slower and louder.
The consciousness comes or gets revealed to you when it is time. You just practice, and then it just happens. While you're witnessing, consciousness comes and goes, and that coming and going is revealed, because normally people are not aware of that consciousness coming and going. So I'm not pursuing or anything, I'm just staying there. But one thing that you mentioned as a kind of a technique, Edgy, is when you're sleeping and as you're getting awake, you can see that happen. But I'm only assuming for majority of the people, they get from deep sleep into dream state and from dream into awakeness. So, I mean, at least in history, or my historical knowledge is that these are all states. If you are coming from a dream state, can you still experience that consciousness coming and going? Or
yes, you can. Yes, you can. Because in the dream state, you're already half awake.
Right.
And it makes transition from the dream state into the consciousness state much easier to catch hold of. Because when you're in the deep sleep state, you can't prepare for the coming of consciousness, because it happens so swiftly. Really, you have to be watching with a microscope even while you're asleep. And the only way to do that in reality is to prepare for it in the sleep state. Because there's some volition in the sleep state.
Because nowadays, I feel like I don't see a difference between my dream and wake state, because my dream state awareness is so vivid that I can remember all of it, or it's like I'm almost narrating the story, transitioning from the dream to a waking state. I don't want to say this out loud because people think it is crazy, but it is just happening. So
yes, just keep doing it.
One last word, Edgy, is that, there's this concept of pratyahara that they talk about in yoga, which is withdrawal of the senses. While I'm not—
Withdrawal of what?
Senses. Withdrawal of the senses. As a 8 limbs of yoga, they talk about that. While again, I'm not theorizing or anything. My experience is, as this stillness is starting to develop, the withdrawal is happening more naturally, without effort. because like Bata said, you're feeling like you're going home. So there's nothing to care about outside. So that experience is naturally happening. So that is one thing. And again, thank you for everything.
Yeah,
Again,
the thing is, is Egamon here? He got terrified by the concept that someday he could lose interest in the world. Like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my family. But you know, none of us ever stayed constant. What we wanted at age 14 is not what we want at age 24. And what we want at age 40 is not what we wanted at age 14 or 24. So he has no ability to predict what he's going to want when he's 60 or 70. By then, he may be entirely sick of his family and of consciousness itself. And Vesselina might be sick of all of her vacillating desires and judgments and say, oh, fuck, I'll just sit here and watch.
actually, on the contrary, I would say deepening of this has made relationships more stronger for me. That's my experience. So, because the connection between you and the other is now deepening because you're not seeing the other as other. And I think that is.
Well, the closer you get to the life force, the more and more important relationships will be to you, because they ultimately will reveal yourself to you as the life force and consciousness working in consort. And relationships are the tool that allows you to awaken Shakti in you. And when Shakti is awakened in you, you also respond to the Shakti in everybody else in the most pristine and free ways. At that point, you can begin to worship the life force in other people and in animals and in insects. And you'll be a total devotional person for a while because of your relationship with all other beings and consciousnesses. But over a time, that wears itself out. After you've done that enough, it wears itself out and you're able to move on and make more changes inside of you. Mark, what say you? Have you any self-disclosures to make other than the usual? All of this is real to you and I'm just plodding on day after day.
Yeah, I really have not too much to add. It's just that I believe that you and your teachings have taken me either to my ultimate realization or as close as I can come. It feels totally satisfying, and I'm just continuing on. Everything is good here.
You know, what I've realized is that I'm in a unique position, having studied with reading Nisargadatta since 1985, and then meeting Jean Dunn in 86 or 87, and being a student with her for 5 years or so, in the rare time she came to the Los Angeles. and also calling her on the phone at times. And then spending 7 or 8 years with Robert, in whose physical presence I'm in a unique position of hearing those two different yet similar expressions of Advaita. And by continuing to read Nisargadatta based on my own experiences, to be able to clear up for students now what Robert and Nisargadatta meant when they said what they said and why they said it. They tell stories. And the interesting thing is, there's such a difference between the way Robert and Nisargadatta tell their stories. Nisargadatta tells his story from the point of view of classical Indian philosophy, using those terms. But he talks more deeply about the mechanics expressed in the traditional model to explain what he means and what the experience of it is like. But Robert talks differently. He talks about his own experiences, but he uses a different model to express. Rather than using Hindu terms, he uses terms, Western terms, like the void, emptiness, nothingness, or unity, or Brahman, which he expresses as the totality of existence. So, going from one to the other, it's hard to fit them together unless you know both of them intimately. And that's my mission, is to be a spokesman for both of them, but generally being able to mix my own experiences of what they're talking about into my expression of what they meant. And at the same time, to constantly talk about dropping all concepts and knowing nothing, because that's the closest you can get to the witness state. But it's such a vast difference between understanding that or hearing that for the first time and actually being there in the void, knowing that's your real nature. That's my job. Welcome, Tove. Feel free to show yourself anytime. We all like to see you. Maxie's back to hiding again. I love you all. Come again next Wednesday. And in the meantime, I'll sign out, and it'll allow me to turn over the leadership of this satsang to somebody else. And I hope they decide to do some chanting or some silent sitting. But whatever you do, don't get into just talking. Now, we also should be having satsangs on the other days of the week at 11. And I urge people that come to download the ultimate medicine from my website, wearesentience.com, by running your finger over Nisargadatta, and the drop menu will point out the various books that are on the site for free. Download it and use that, and go through that book page by page, chapter by chapter, having somebody read it, and then silence while you absorb it. then read another page or two, and then silence and absorb it. And a longer silence, and then some chanting. I love you. Take care of yourself. Honor yourself. Love yourself when you find it. Love yourself even if you don't know what it is that you're loving. Feel reverence for yourself. Be gentle with yourself. No sudden movements, no great letting go of anything at any time, thinking you must do something to make rapid advancements. Just be aware of yourself. And if you can, be aware of consciousness itself as a whole. Goodbye. Okay, let's see if I can get out without ruining everything. Okay, I got that. Got that. Who can I give it to? Well, it's very strange. It assigned it to Cassie and Ian. So who am I to fight that? Windows tells me to do that. What should I do? Bye-bye.